Hey guys, in today's video we're going over 5 common mistakes when using wireless music gear. Over the last few years I've reviewed and done tutorials on multiple wireless products on this channel, wireless mics, wireless guitar / instruments, wireless in-ear monitors, and even wireless MIDI devices. And I've seen a repeat number of mistakes being made either in the comment section on the videos, when I see musicians playing live, or even musicians that I've played with live have made some of these mistakes. And most importantly, I actually made all of these mistakes when I started using wireless gear. I made all of these mistakes except for the first one. But all the other mistakes I actually made when I started using wireless for the first time. And the third one in this video is actually the most common one that I see, especially in the comment section on my videos. All of these tips will be applied to any wireless music gear. So this is for wireless mics, wireless instrument systems for guitar, bass, violin, stuff like that, wireless in-ear monitors, and so on and so forth. It will apply to all of that. But before we get started, this is a music tech channel, wireless in-ear monitors, MIDI programming, gear reviews. I do gear giveaways on this channel. If you want to see more videos like this in the future, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to ring the bell to be notified when I put out new videos, and hitting the thumbs up button is a free way to support the channel. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, mistake number 1. I was actually surprised at how common this is. Not knowing how to scan and or change the channel on your wireless system. I've seen so many people just turn on their wireless, leave it on whatever it starts when it boots up, and just leave it there and just hope that it always works. They never learn how to change a channel, never learn how to do a scan for the best channel. And it probably works fine for most of the gigs, but then they get, 10 gigs in and they play at a new venue and that wireless signal is already taken and they're like, oh, I don't know what to do. That happens more often than you might realize. You definitely have to know how to scan, or if you don't have an option to scan, how to change the channel manually. The most extreme version of this I saw in my comment section was from someone who had a really high-end wireless Shure system, and they said, oh yeah, it was set up, it was really great. This guy came in and set it all up. I think it was for like a church or something, but it was some sort of permanent installation. And he said, oh, now it's not working. And I said, have you tried changing the channel? And they basically didn't want to do that, and they were just going to buy a whole new system. They were willing to spend likely thousands of dollars just because they thought their wireless just wasn't working now, when in reality, all it just needed was a simple scan to find a new frequency. So I play live a lot. That's my main job, is live gigs, and I scan at basically every single show. My microphone, my in-ears, and my wireless guitar, I scan at basically every single show. So my Shure wireless microphone system, and then in my Sennheiser guitar system and my Sennheiser in-ear monitor systems, they all give me a reading, which is really nice. So when I turn it on, I'll get a little indicator that'll say, oh, I'm getting a little bit of a signal already, so I know to scan. Sometimes I won't scan if I turn on my device and it's getting no reading. I'm like, okay, it's probably on a clear channel. Usually that's okay. However, usually I prefer to just scan anyways, just to find the best and clearest channel available. I had another friend who went out on tour and he said that the sound guy just refused to scan, and I really would love to hear his reasoning for that, because they're going from city to city to city. I don't blame people for not knowing it, especially if they're new to wireless, but a sound guy refusing to scan, that's a really bizarre situation. So don't be that guy. So if your system does have a way to scan, and most non-cheap ones do, so Shure and Sennheiser ones almost all have a way to scan for the best channel. If you're buying some of the cheaper ones, it might not have a way to scan. But it's really easy to do. You basically just hit scan. It'll scan the environment for the best channel. It'll give you some options. Usually it'll say within a group, it'll say, in group 1, it found 30 channels. In group 2, it found 15. In group 3, it found 10 or something like that. So you would want to use group 1, and you would assign it to one of those channels. So scan and choose one of the frequencies that it gave you as a clear option. And again, you'll have to look at your specific device on how to do it. I have reviewed basically all of the Shure systems as well as my nice Sennheiser system that I really like. So watch those videos if you do want to know how to scan on those in particular. If you're using something different, you'll just have to look through the manual. And then most systems, if you have a scan, most of the time you'll have a way to sync. It just syncs with infrared from the transmitter to the receiver. It's usually pretty simple. However, if yours does not have a way to scan, they almost always have a way to manually change the channel. Very few wireless devices that I found don't have at least some sort of way to manually change the channel. Even like $100 in-ear monitor systems and $50 wireless guitar systems have a way to change a channel in most cases. So again, it's usually a menu or a button push just to change the channel, and then you set it to the same channel or frequency on the other device, the transmitter or the receiver. Sometimes it'll give you group and channel Other times it'll just say frequency. Other times it'll just say 1, 2, 3, or 4, something like that. You just want to make sure your transmitter and your receiver are set to the same frequency or group and channel or number or whatever. Okay, so the next problem deals with antenna placement. So first of all, transmitter to receiver, the best way to get a wireless signal is from line of sight from transmitter to receiver. No matter what wireless system you're using, line of sight is the best way to get the best response out of your wireless system. So it's usually pretty easy for guitar players because most of the time it's guitar, just a pedal board. So there's almost always a line of sight there. But when your receiver is like all the way at the side of the stage, you know, in a rack or something like that, or your in-ears are all the way over there, that can be a little bit more difficult. Speaking of using rack mounts, don't block the antennas by burying it in the back of the rack. That's one of the biggest mistakes that you can do. They make rack mount kits for a reason, and what you can do is you can mount it to the front of the rack so the antennas are in the front of the rack, and then it has a clear line of sight from the transmitter to the receiver. If you bury it in the rack, you have almost no line of sight with that. And so a lesser known problem is with the antenna placement and how they should be arranged. So if you don't have external antennas, this won't really apply to you. But something like this was the first system that I ever got, actually. The way I started using it is I had the antennas like this. I just left them like that. That's not what you want to do. You actually want to have them about 90 degrees separated from each other. That's the best placement, usually like this. If you have one, obviously you don't get that choice and you probably should just go straight upward. But if you have two of them, this is usually the best angle to have. But a really common mistake that actually I've seen still used by a lot of musicians nowadays, when it's in like a rack or something like that, when it's off to the side, instead of having the antennas pointed up, they'll have the antennas just pointed at them. So see the antenna, say the musician's over there, over on the other side of the stage, and they'll point the antenna at them. That's not actually what you want to do. So these are omnidirectional antennas, which means that they get the signal all around, front, back, left, right, all around. But they do not get signal this way, up and down. They get the signal this way. So what happens when it's like this, when it's pointed upward, you're getting it all around here. So the musicians are over here. That's where you want to be capturing the RF signal from. But if you point it like this, now it's just the strongest that it's getting that wireless signal is from the floor to the ceiling. It's not actually going to be getting signal from this direction. It's going to be getting signal from this direction. So you want to point it up so that it gets the signal this way. I definitely made that mistake for sure on my wireless journey as well. So don't make the same mistake that I did. There are directional antennas. They're called paddle antennas sometimes. I just reviewed one recently on my channel, but those are directional antennas. You want to point those exactly where you want to get the signal from, and it rejects signal from behind it. Those are directional antennas. These are the more common ones, and those are omnidirectional antennas. So make sure that you're placing those correctly. And be sure to check out my video on those directional paddle antennas if you're interested in seeing those. All right, mistake number 3. This is the one that I see the most in my comment section. It's basically the phrase, we're on a tight budget, but we need 10 plus wireless systems. Not necessarily 10 plus, but multiple wireless systems at once, but we're on a tight budget. So this is a problem because basically the cheaper the wireless, the less frequencies it has as options to transmit on, and the less wireless that can be used simultaneously at the same time. So those cheap ones are great if you're only using 1 or 2 wireless at once. But if you're starting to add more and more wireless to your setup, you need to start spending more money to have a wider range of options for frequencies that you can find and a system that can handle that many wireless being used at once. And we're going to look at just like the entry level Shure, the BLX system. We're going to go to the SLXD, which is kind of a pro level system, and then the ULXD, which is a really high end system. So first of all, look at the RF tuning bandwidth. It's just a fancy word for the range of frequencies that you can find a clear channel on. As you go up in price, you see how much more you get. So you already have more options of frequencies that you can find, but also this is how many you can use at once with each of those systems. So again, the higher up you go, the more wireless systems you can use at once. The cheaper stuff is meant to be used with like 1, 2, maybe 3, especially the really cheap stuff that I reviewed on my channel. And that's the biggest problem that I see. And I try to make sure to mention that in my videos. If you buy really cheap wireless, you're not going to be able to, have everybody use those. Some people get really excited, like, oh, great. I was looking at the Sennheiser in-ear monitor system for my band. It was going to cost $4,000, but now we have this, $100 one, so we can just spend $400 and be fine. You might be able to get it to work. It might work at some shows or even at your rehearsal or something like that. But then you'll get to a show and, two of the in-ears aren't working and you can't find a clear channel no matter what you do. So that's one of the problems with cheaper wireless gear. You do have to think of how many you're going to be using at once. Also keep in mind, with those specs of how many you can use at once, that is in perfect conditions. That means there's no other wireless interference going on anywhere around you, which hardly ever happens. So that's the absolute max that you can use. So I made this mistake myself. The way that happened for me is that, this was my first wireless that I got. A friend of mine sold it to me for $200. That was half off, and the obsession started. I mean, if you've seen my channel, even if I play acoustic, I have wireless mic, wireless guitar, wireless in-ears, and even wireless MIDI, even for acoustic. It just cleans up the stage. I hate stepping on cables and stuff like that. I'm pretty obsessed with wireless. But I started using my wireless guitar. I was really excited about that. And then I had my drummer show me how we could actually all mix our own in-ear monitors and all have our own custom mixes in our ears and have the same mix at every show. Sure enough, we started getting wireless in-ear monitors. 3 years later, about 2017, I wanted everything to be wireless. We had 3 wireless mics, 2 wireless guitars, 2 wireless in-ear monitors. I even wanted a wireless for our cajon player. We used to just play acoustic in one of my bands. So it was 2 acoustic guitars and then a cajon. I even wanted to mic the cajon wirelessly. It was completely unnecessary, but that's how obsessed I got with wireless. The problem that I ran into with this is that it was all cheap stuff that I was using. But all of that I was putting in a rack, which is something I'm going to get to here in number 4 as well. But eventually it just gave out. I just kept using too much wireless all at once. And that's what caused a lot of problems. And we started getting a lot of dropouts and a lot of issues with our gear. If I would have stuck with just the PGX and then my X5, and the X5 is on 2.4. If you haven't watched my video on understanding 2.4 wireless gear, you 100% should if you have any wireless gear that operates in 2.4 gigahertz. So watch my video on that for sure. But I'm getting sidetracked. So if I just stuck with the PGX and the X5, I think that would have been okay for the most part. It's when I started adding a bunch of other stuff into the mix that I ran into problems. But this is the thing, is that you can get away with some of the cheap stuff if you mix it with some of the high-end stuff. So in one of my bands, we actually have, for the higher-end stuff, my wireless mic is the Shure SLXD, my singer's wireless mic is the Shure QLXD, and then my drummer has the Shure ULXD, which is ironic that the drummer who doesn't have to move has the highest end wireless microphone system out of all of us. And then for the other high-end stuff, my wireless in-ear monitor system is the Sennheiser EW300, and then my Shure wireless guitar system is also the EW500. Now, at the same time as all this high-end stuff, we're also using some cheaper stuff. My singer's in-ear monitors are the Phoenix Pro PTM 11. My drummer is using the PTM 10 by Phoenix Pro. And then my singer uses a wireless for his guitar. He uses the cheap Swift Audio one, and sometimes he'll use another one that's on 5.8, but most of the time he uses the Swift Audio one. All of that stuff so far has worked fine. We haven't had a problem using a mixture of the high-end ones with these lower, cheaper entry-level ones. 5 higher-end ones and 3 cheaper ones does seem to work. We did recently just do our 10-year anniversary show, and we had, extra musicians, extra guitars, extra all sorts of stuff. We went all out for this one. So I brought some more cheap stuff for that one. That is when it started giving us problems. We definitely started running into our max limit when we did that. Again, so it all depends on the show. It really does. Some shows it'll be fine. Other times it won't be. But the higher end stuff, you can use more at once. For the most part, if you're saying we're on a budget, but we need 10 wireless systems, if you buy all the cheap stuff, you're most likely going to set yourself up for failure. And you should just save up the money to have a better and more reliable wireless system, because that's what the higher end stuff is meant for. Okay, number 4, more antenna talk. So this is a common mistake if you use multiple wireless at once, is having a bunch of wireless all in a rack, just antennas stacked on top of each other. So even if you rack the antennas to the front, which again you should, remember, don't have the antennas just in the back of the rack. And even if you have some of the highest end wireless systems, if you have a bunch of antennas stacked on top of each other, that's actually a great way to degrade the quality of your wireless signal, and you'll get dropouts and interference or less range and stuff like that. So let's say you have 4 wireless systems, each with, 2 antennas. That would mean you have 8 antennas just stacked on top of each other. But there's too much RF signal going on in that area. It just causes all sorts of problems. So the solution is to use either a combiner or a distribution system. So I've been making this mistake for a while. So for in-ear monitor systems, I guess it's technically called a combiner. For wireless mics and guitars, it's called a distribution system. Sometimes I'll mix that up still to this day because you are combining the signal all into one. But I mean, just wanted to throw that out there in case if I make that mistake while I'm filming this. Some people say if you have more than 2 wireless in a rack, you should get a combiner. I think that's a little extreme. You can get away with 2, and I personally do have 2 in my rack right now. But I would say if you have more than 3, specifically 4, if you have more than 4, I would definitely start using a combiner or a distribution system. I mean, it's always better to have it than to not have it, for sure. It will definitely make the reliability better. You're definitely not going to complain about having it no matter how many you use, but especially if you're using 4 or more, I would definitely get a combiner or a distribution system. So if you have only 2 wireless in a rack together, you can actually just get a passive combiner. This is one by Shure and it's pretty affordable, but this will combine 2 wireless systems together. So keep in mind, some systems like the Shure SLXD, the ULXD, and the Axion systems, they have systems where that's, you can get 2 or 4 in 1 U of rack space, and they already have just 2 antennas. You think about it, that's already basically combining the wireless signals to just 2 antennas. You have 2 receivers and just 2 antennas. Normally, if you had 2 separate ones, you would have a total of 4 antennas. Or, like I said, the ULXD and the Axion have 4 in one. So that's instead of having 8 antennas, you just have 2. So if you have like 2 Shure SLXD systems, of the double ones, you can combine 2 of those together, and then you have 4 wireless microphones together with just 1 pair of antennas. Pretty cool. However, if you need to combine or distribute to more than 2, you're going to need to get an active antenna combiner and distribution system. So those are great because 1, they actually will power your gear, so that's less cables that you have to plug in for power, which is awesome. But when you split the signal, like with the passive one, you get a slight RF signal loss. It's actually okay if you just do that with 2, but if you do that with more than 2, the RF signal loss is too much and you need the active solution in order to compensate for that RF signal loss. So this is super technical. But with a passive one, you get 3 decibels of signal loss. My understanding is that within 5 decibels of signal loss, that is tolerable, but you don't want more than that. So if you combined 2 of them passively, that is now 6 decibels of RF signal loss, and that is too much. And that's why you want to use an active combiner. So for 2 systems, you can get a passive. For 3 or more, you need an active one. Again, I did just review the Phoenix Pro PAS225X. Had to think about those numbers there for a second. Check out that video if you are interested in that. That is an active distribution system, and it is very affordable as well. Definitely worth checking out if you're interested in doing something like this. Okay, and then last but not least, using groups and channels incorrectly. This is going to be a short one because I actually have a whole video dedicated to this, but it is still a very common problem that I see and that I actually made for quite a long time when I first started using wireless. So if you have, higher end stuff, if you have the cheaper stuff, you probably don't have groups and channels. I made the mistake of going, I'm going to set this wireless to group 1 channel whatever, and the next one to group 2 channel whatever, and then the next one to group 3 channel whatever. That's not actually how groups work. Groups actually give you a set of frequencies that are meant to work well together. So if you have 3 wireless systems, say all, Shure SLXD systems, so the first thing you want to do is do a group scan, and your system will say what group has the most channels available. That's the first thing you want to do. But let's say it finds group 3, that group 3 has the most channels available. You want to set the first wireless to group 3 channel 1, the next one to group 3 channel 2, the next one to group 3 channel 3. I mean, it might say, group 3 channel 3 is taken, so do group 3 channel 4. But the groups are meant to be used together. You're not supposed to separate the groups. If I did like group 1 channel 1 and group 2 channel 1, those are actually probably going to collide more likely. So group 3 channel 1, group 3 channel 2, group 3 channel 3 is what you want to do, not group 1 channel 1, group 2 channel 1, and group 3 channel 1. It's actually the inefficient way to use groups and channels. But I have a whole video dedicated to that where you can find out about bands, groups, and channels. So you can click up above or down below to learn more about that. So those are my 5 tips of common wireless mistakes that I've seen and that I've made myself. So I hope that helped you guys out. If you made it to the end of this video, do me a favor, just hit the thumbs up button. It's a free way to support the channel and feed the YouTube algorithm gods, so I would appreciate it. All the gear that I mentioned in this video will be linked down below. I'm also going to link down below all of my recommendations for wireless gear, from entry level to pro level to really high high-end and even the cheap stuff. Just again, don't be the guy who's like, oh, I can buy 20 of these cheap ones and we can use 20 of them with my big band orchestra or something like that. Just, you got it. Remember all the things that we learned. But I will post links down below to all the ones that I recommend on all the 4 different tiers from, absolute beginner, cheap, basic to the highest end stuff possible. So links to all of that will be down below. And that way you can check out ones that fit your needs specifically. So on the end screen, I'm going to link to my favorite wireless system that I use for my guitar specifically, as well as a video for one of the best affordable wireless in-ear monitor systems in my opinion. So check out some of those videos by clicking the link on your screen now. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on my social media pages at Scott Ewell Music on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Again, check out some of those videos by clicking the links on your screen now. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you guys again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. So I've been making this.